One of the questions I often ask my clients is, what do you want your relationship with food to look like? And one of the common responses is along the lines of, I just don't want to be thinking about food all the time. Or even, I just want to not have to think about food anymore. I want food to be a non-issue. If you're somebody who constantly thinks about food, you probably know what it's like to be with a bunch of friends. There's snacks on the table, everyone's chatting around you, and all you can think about is the snacks on the table. I remember this situation well, and in my mind what would have been going on was a conflict between wanting some of the snacks but feeling like I shouldn't have the snacks and wondering how much of the snacks is appropriate to eat before people start to notice. The real downside to it was it meant that I was less present with my friends. There'd be a conversation going on and half of me is listening and half of me is hyper-focused on these snacks on the table. And if you relate to this, it may be baffling to try to understand that other people are just not thinking about them. It's weird that it's not a big deal to other people when it's a constant thing in your own mind. And of course, the reality is we can't get to a place where we don't have to think about food because we have to obtain food, we have to prepare food, we have to eat food, which involves making decisions. And so in order to make decisions, we have to be able to think about food, but probably not in the way you currently are. You may wonder, if people aren't thinking about food, what are they thinking about? Or more important, what would you be thinking about if you weren't thinking about food all the time? It could be tempting to be pulled off into something quite idealistic, and this was me, imagining, gosh, if I wasn't thinking about food all the time, imagine how productive I'd be. Imagine what amazing thoughts I would be having. I would just be so present in my life and so engaged. I felt like I would be able to do everything better in my life if I wasn't consumed by thoughts of food. The worst thing about having constant food thoughts is it felt like I was the only one who was thinking like this. Everyone else around me seemed quite normal, and I was the one obsessing about food and very out of control in my behavior around food. So for years, I just carried a sense of feeling like a complete failure, that I was failing at one of the most basic things in life, which was just feeding myself. And of course, for many people who feel out of control around food, the dream is usually, I want to be able to control my food intake and lose weight. That's what the majority of people who binge or feel out of control around food really want. And so they imagine, if I wasn't thinking about food all the time, then this would be easier. It would be easier to control my food and get the outcome that I want. But firstly, we need to recognize where all these thoughts around food is coming from. Because if you are restricting, and so your biological appetite is disrupted, part of our biology around our appetite can actually force us to think about food. There are various hormones that drive us to eat, and the job of these hormones are to make us think about food, to become more food motivated. So when we try to restrict or control, we are going to obsess about food. Most people find their food obsession doesn't start until they start trying to restrict their food intake. So that's one piece. But aside from that, if you have an actual self-belief about not being good enough, failing at everything that you do, and food in your body has become another manifestation of that, but it doesn't just show up with food. It shows up in other areas of your life. So you might feel like you're failing with food, but you're likely to feel like you're failing in your career, and you're failing as a parent, and you're failing in relationships. This is what I want you to consider. Are your food thoughts part of a wider theme that spreads throughout the rest of your life? But the food becomes the main focus because in our minds we think, well, food is the thing in life that should be within our control. We know we can't control other people, or only to a certain extent, but our mind tells us we should at least be able to control what we put in our mouths. And so if we can succeed at this, hopefully we can shift this feeling that we have about ourselves that we're also experiencing in other places in our lives. Now, this might not be everybody, but if it's you, even if you fix this food problem, it transposes onto something else. So a lot of my beliefs around myself and food were just so shame-filled. And so working on my recovery did mean working on the shame. But then when food was no longer the problem, that shameful sense of not doing enough, I think is a big one for me. I'm not doing enough. and I'm not doing things as well as I should. That was playing out with food, but then it just moved on to other things. And really, if I'm being totally honest, because in order for me to get rid of this obsessive food noise, I had to let go of the pursuit of intentional weight loss. And so that meant, great, I wasn't thinking about food all the time in the same way. But now my mind was left with a sense of disappointment that, oh, this was just going to be my body now. And even though I recognized that I needed to give up the intentional weight loss in order to recover, there was still a part of me that felt like that was a bit of a failing. Some people are able to control their food intake and lose weight. And the fact that I had to give it up if I wanted to have mental peace around food felt like somehow, and there was just still a part of me that thought that was a weakness. And that's taken a long time to undo. And so if we think about it, we have to think about food. And so rather than thinking, how do I stop thinking about food all the time? It might be, how do I change the way I think about food? It's changing how you think about food, not whether you think about food. You're trying to distract yourself to not think about food. There might be a place for it depending on your circumstances, but that could also work against you because you don't learn how to think differently around food. And that might sound all well and good, but how do you do it? So I've got 3 things that you could do. Number 1, this is the boring one. This is the one that sometimes people have the most resistance to. And that is to curate the information you are exposed to. It's very hard to make changes to the way that you are thinking when you're getting mixed messages. So I might have mentioned this previously on a video, but YouTube will show me other channels that my viewers are watching. And a lot of them are things like carnivore and keto and quite restrictive ways of eating. And I'm not saying that everybody who eats like this has some kind of disordered eating. I think this is about honoring our own bodies and our own personal experiences. So it can sound like, oh, you're telling me that I should stop trying to aspire to this. There's no should about it. It's not about whether you aspire to it or not. It's what is the consequence on your mental health and your behavior when you are chasing this particular lifestyle. Is it actually working for you? You see it working for other people, so you think that it should be working for you, and therefore you are continually making yourself wrong for not being able to adopt or stick to that particular lifestyle. I went on a podcast recently and they sent me some questions ahead of time, and one of the questions that they said they might ask was to ask me about skinny talk, which I don't even really know what that is. I'm just going to guess that that is like thinness coming up on reels over and over again, this emphasis on thin bodies. Well, none of that is in my social media feed anyway. I don't see any of those things. So sometimes when people are talking to me about the pressure to be thin on social media, I'm not experiencing those pressures because it's not in my feed. We are social creatures, and whether you like it or not, we are very influenced by our culture and the opinions and actions of those around us. So be intentional about what you're exposing yourself to. And the second one, because I think shame is so important to dismantle if we're going to make any changes, and that is to recognize that this is not your fault that you feel as out of control as you do. Again, this can sound disempowering. Well, if it's not my fault, that sounds like I can't do anything about it. That's not what I'm saying at all. Out of the over 250 videos I've done to date, this video that I have done about 3 reasons why binge eating is not your fault, I think is one of the most important videos I've ever made. So if you haven't seen that one, I'm going to link to it at the end of this video, and I would suggest you check it out. Because for as long as you believe that there's just something fundamentally wrong with you, your behavior is going to keep presenting itself as there's something fundamentally wrong with you, because our actions follow our beliefs. And the third thing, in order to change the way you think about food, is that you need some kind of mental construct of what that would even look like. So it's being able to answer the question about what a healthy relationship with food looks like, not just from a behavioral perspective, but what it sounds like in your head and what it feels like in your body. So I've got a couple of resources for you to go into this a bit more. I have done a video called What a Healthy Relationship with Food Looks Like, and I break this down here. And the reason why this is so important is because if we cannot imagine an alternative, how are we going to create an alternative? When people talk about, I want to stop thinking about food, we're talking about the absence of something. We can't reach in and take something out and just leave a big gaping hole in our minds. So it's practicing new ways of thinking and being around food. And another good resource for this is the intuitive eating model. And I have a whole playlist on this channel about intuitive eating. And I'm running a course on intuitive eating, and the next one starts in September. I'll pop the link below. People often oversimplify intuitive eating because they think it's just eating what you feel like eating. But when your appetite is dysregulated, you're all over the place, and you've got a rebel in you that doesn't want to be told what to do, even by an intuitive eating model. We need to look at other ways to approach this. So I'm a big fan of looking at different resources and picking and choosing what works for you. Because if you construct this yourself, then it will feel like yours. It will feel like you own it. And then it's less likely to trigger a rebellious response. Because let's face it, if you've ever experienced compulsive eating, sometimes it just feels really rebellious, just feels like a big F you. Because it often comes from a part of us that wants to be free. And if you think what you're supposed to do is learn how to control your food in order to lose weight, that probably isn't going to feel like freedom. If it did, it would be easy and you'd be doing it already. But the part of you that wants to be free is just going, no, I'm not going to stick to those rules. So anyway, I'm going to link to the 2 videos here. I'm going to link to the playlist below. I think we're probably nearing to the end, so I might just call the kitty cats over to say goodbye. Kitty cats, do you want some fish? Do you want some fish? Come and get your fish. Come and get your fish. Come on. It's a goodbye from Ollie. And it's goodbye from Otley. I'll see you on the next video.